Hey everybody, it's been another month, and with another month comes a whole nother set of questions. Now we're gonna have 4 videos total. I'm gonna break them down. Some are gonna have 4 questions, some are gonna have 3, but let's jump into the first ones. The first question is, could you do a video on managing BPD and why do we feel like we don't fit in so much of the time? I was diagnosed, but it's been 5 months and I still have no help. I don't know how to manage it anymore. It just feels like an alarm clock constantly going off in my head. But instead of a sound, it's simply, you're never gonna fit in. Why even try? It's better to die. I honestly think that when it comes to having a personality disorder, which means it's something that's pervasive, right? It's essentially, it can feel like it's part of who we are, part of our personality. I really don't like that term, by the way, personality disorder, but BPD is something that we live with. We feel it all the time. We can have good days or good weeks or good months, but we can have really shitty days, weeks, and months. And so when we're in a really bad place, especially when it comes to borderline personality disorder, that bad place can feel terrible and full of depression, suicidal thoughts, and self-injury urges. Because part of what I've always talked about when it comes to BPD is us being like emotional burn victims, meaning we feel everything so intensely. So any small wound or sense of abandonment, like someone maybe doesn't like us or they might not want to spend that day with us, it is terrible. It's like the end of the world for us. And so I believe that it's because of that, because of us being so sensitive to people around us and sometimes lashing out as a result because we essentially feel like we don't have any control over our emotions. That can be really isolating and make us feel like we don't belong and people don't want to be around us. And the thoughts that come along with BPD are usually very negative self-talk. And it tells us people are going to leave us and nobody cares. And so that just perpetuates this cycle. And so what I would encourage you to do is to actually start doing some DBT work on your own. If you guys don't remember what DBT is, it's dialectical behavior therapy, and it's a therapy that was created to help those with borderline personality disorder. And this is my favorite book. I just pulled it off my bookshelf behind me, but this is a great skills workbook. And I even have, this one's great too. And this is all worksheets, things you can print out, things you can copy, you can write in it, tear the pages out. These are great resources. And so I would encourage you to pick these up. I have them in my Amazon store that's on my website. You can just click through. It makes it easy so you don't have to search for them, or you can search for them on Amazon. But I would grab some workbooks and I would start today, because a lot of the emotion regulation and the mindfulness techniques can really help you manage now until you get placed with a professional. And if you aren't able to purchase the books, if budget's an issue, I completely understand. Just do me a favor, and at the end of every day, I want you to tell yourself 3 to 5 things that you like about your day and you. I want you to make it very personal. I want you to talk about how wonderful you are. Because BPD tries to strip us of any confidence, any self-worth, and we need to fight to get it back. Because once we start feeling a little better about ourselves, then we're able to more easily control our emotions and manage our relationships. And obviously, I know there's a lot more to it, but that's just a good place to start. And the second question is, how can you deal with emotions you have been suppressing for years without falling apart? I feel I only have the option to feel nothing or numb, or to feel everything and drown in my emotions. This is so common. If I got a nickel for every time a client told me that they were scared to feel things because I think they're going to be like drowned. One of my clients even said, I feel like I have this dam up that's keeping my city safe and not completely covered in water. And if I let one brick out, the whole thing's going to collapse. And that was like her emotions, like the water was her emotions. And so it's really common. Don't think that you're crazy, but it is safe and we can do it using feelings charts. Ta-da! I know everybody loves those / hates those, but you can just Google feelings chart and you can print some out, and I would encourage you to start there. And if it's hard to even track, because often some of my clients are like, I don't even know what I felt today. I've tried it myself, and some days, because I'm busy, I honestly am like, maybe I just felt stressed. It can be hard to come up with some, but just start maybe with some easy ones. I felt happy, or I felt sad. I felt excited, or I felt stressed. Start with a few that aren't so emotionally charged. I know that sounds silly when we're talking about feelings and emotions, but there are some feelings and emotions that are just easier to feel. And so start with those and start tracking them. That's kind of like us warming up to the idea of having emotions and acknowledging them. And then the second step that I do with my clients, and this has been really beneficial, so I think it's a great tool, is to start collaging about emotions. And I would encourage you to take a piece of white paper, like a bigger piece, and in the middle I want you to write in big bold letters, box letters, bubble letters, whatever, the emotion word or the feeling word. Let's start off with happy. And so we write happy, maybe we make it yellow. That seems like a happy color. We draw sunshines and flowers, and we write other words that we associate with happy all over this collage, as well as other images. And if you're like me and you're not artistic, you can cut things out of, different magazines, and you can paste them in kind of like a collage. And by doing this, we're allowing ourselves to consider an emotion and to feel it. Because in order to write the words that we associate with it and other images, we can even write little stories if you want, anything that, sparks a memory. We're actually allowing ourselves to process an emotion. Hooray! It's like a sneaky way of getting in there without having to feel overwhelmed. I would encourage you to start with the easy ones, like I'm excited, or I'm happy, or I'm content. Some of those can be really easy. Even some of my clients say sad is a pretty safe one because they felt it a lot and they're very comfortable with it. Whatever feels comfortable for you and doesn't feel scary and make you want to shut down, start there. And then slowly work into the other emotions as you feel comfortable. Maybe we work into, feeling regret, or anger is like usually one of the last ones I do because everybody hates it. But starting out that way helps us feel more safe and more in control of how we feel them and process through emotions before we feel completely drowned in them. The third question for today's video is, while doing an abuse experience inventory, I came across the idea of enmeshment and also sexual anorexia. I had never heard the latter term, but apparently it's a form of sexual addiction in the other extreme. It is. I don't know if enmeshment really qualifies as sexual abuse. It totally can, but I can definitely see the impact of it on my beliefs, relationships, etc. Sexual anorexia makes sense for me as I do treat sexuality as this base part of myself that is separate from the whole, if that makes sense. Like it's a part of me that I want to purge or not accept as an aspect of my being. Then I can't deal with certain urges and I seek out porn. To pursue a relationship would mean needing to integrate this sexuality into my whole, which feels so wrong. Is it helpful to have more of an idea of why I have the opinions about my sexuality that I do? But in some ways, I need to feel a bit more hopeless. How do I fix my brain? I thought this was a great question. I've heard from many of you that you do feel this like black and white thinking about sexuality as a whole or sex. Many saying that they feel sexually anorexic, like they're not interested, they're cut off. Maybe I'm asexual, I don't really know. Or then the flip side, maybe 6 months later, we're hypersexualized and we're, having sex with a lot of different people. And it can feel like that when we don't have a true sense of what it is for us. And I liked how this person talked about integrating sexuality as part of their whole. And I think that's honestly where we start. And I know that sounds like a really big undertaking, but all I mean is we'd have to start journaling or talking out with a therapist, whatever is easiest, about what it would look like if you had a sex life. What would that mean if you did? What does it mean if you don't? What if someone tried to initiate sex that you cared about? What would that look like? We need to kind of live in the imaginary land of it for a while before we can get comfortable with it. Because in my experience with my clients who feel this way, even the mention of someone trying to kiss them or touch them sexually is like, it's too much. And so we have to start with the imagine, like what if someone asked us on a date? What if they reached for our hand? What if they touched our back? What if they kiss us on the cheek? What would that mean? And what would that say about us? And what would that say about them? Because we need to figure out what our core beliefs about sexuality are and what it could look like in our life. And once we get comfortable with that, we can decide what's appropriate and not appropriate for us, because everyone's different, right? Some people enjoy having sex with multiple partners all the time. Other people want monogamous relationships. Other people, aren't really interested in that at all. And we need to figure out how that looks and what that feels like for you. And so give yourself and give your brain and yourself the time to figure it out and to be curious. Consider this part of your questioning period where you wonder, what would it look like if I wanted to date a person? And if they tried to grab my hand, would I like that? And what would a healthy sex life look like to me? Am I interested in that? Give yourself the time to question and to journal and to imagine it. And I would hope that you could talk comfortably with your therapist about this over time. I know that that's also something that causes people a lot of anxiety, but if we slowly ease into it and we first start just being honest with ourselves about it, hopefully that can open up a really great dialogue to help you better understand your own sexuality as a whole and how it can become part of you. And the fourth and final question for this video is, Kati, as someone who is terrified of my therapist's abandonment, especially since my last therapist just abandoned me, as you know, I do know, it was terrible. I am hyper aware of boundaries and am following my new therapist's lead in this regard. That's great. I'm not a client who has had any contact between sessions except for scheduling, but I do want to check in about some stuff that's been going on. One, I'm almost always her last client of the evening, and if a session has been particularly hard, she sometimes offers to walk me out of the building. It's a big, dark, creepy as fuck building with narrow hallways and stairs, so if I were doing trauma work, you can imagine that might be tough. Yeah, that would be terrible. Since she's leaving anyways, because she's her last client, that makes sense. It doesn't always seem to happen, and I don't expect it, but so I think that this is okay. I agree. Sometimes when session is done and she's taking payment, etc., we get into a conversation completely irrelevant to therapy and chat for a while, like 10-15 minutes. Should she be allowing that much contact? I'm always so cognizant of taking up her time, but she seems to be equally as engaged as me. Is this all okay? I love this question because I understandably so, based on the last experience, and many of us struggle with attachment with our therapist, and I talk so much about boundaries. Is this stuff okay? And in short, my short answer is yes, this stuff is completely fine. I have walked clients out to their car, especially if it's dark or if I fear that it might be a little triggering or they're already, feeling scary. And if I'm leaving on my own, that would be fine. The only reason that I honestly wouldn't do that with a client is if I feared for my own safety and didn't think it was safe for me to be with them outside of the office, which I know sounds crazy, but that's something that as a mental health professional, I have to consider. So know that is completely normal and fine. And also just because it happens when you've had a particularly tough session and her building's kind of creepy and it's dark, like all that stuff just makes logical sense. So whenever you're kind of worried that it's overstepping boundaries, just consider like, hey, does it just make logical sense and it actually has nothing to do with therapy? It's just like being a human and being kind, then it's probably okay. And the second part about talking when payment is happening, I have clients who do that too, and it kind of goes both ways. Some clients still want to talk about what's happening because they didn't feel like they had enough time, because 50 minutes can go by like really quickly. Other clients are like, so are you going anywhere this weekend? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to Palm Springs or something. And it's very, benign conversation, but it just helps lighten the mood. And often I do it because I think it makes my clients feel like a little better and lighter as they leave. And so that also is very, normal and okay, because you're not really running her late and she's not spending like, 30 more minutes. I would just be aware if it happens all the time and if it runs into what could essentially be her next client time, even though I know you're her last, that's when I would kind of, notice it. But 10-15 minutes is kind of the time that we have for in-between clients. And if she's engaged, it's technically okay. I hope you found those answers helpful. Thank you so much for your support month after month. You have no idea how much it means to me. I mean, you're the reason that my channel can still exist, and I just, thank you. And there's so many more questions. Don't miss those videos. So I'll see you over there. Bye.